Super Smash Bros. Brawl is a fantastic source of quality Nintendo fan service. Some of you know where I'm going with this, and I want to thank you for doing your homework. Deep within the menus upon menus of Brawl's UI, inside of the massive vault, is the Nintendo Chronicle, a list of every game Nintendo has ever published, as of December 2007 of course. It's such a fascinating look at all of the things Nintendo was willing to put their money into, man. You see, people thought that Sora in Smash was such a big deal, but the true historians know that Game & Watch Mickey Mouse is truly what paved the way for this partnership to take place. Don't fool yourself otherwise. You got Popeye on NES, multiple baseball games featuring Ken Griffey Jr., so much so you would practically think he was a Nintendo character. He was on an official Christmas card for crying out loud. The Virtual Boy. But at the bottom of the Game Boy line is where one of my favorite nuggets of Nintendo trivia resides. Hamtaro! In fact, jump over to the GBA and hey, look at that! More Hamtaro! I have just never gotten over this information, man. I get it, you know, licensed properties, they make a lot of money, sure. Nowadays we have the Switch, Nintendo has worked with both Marvel and DC, they clearly don't care. But Hamtaro? Alright, so here's a bit of a history lesson for all of you uncultured viewers out there who don't know about the almighty Hamtaro. The anime is by far one of the cutest damn things you could ever bear witness to. Across multiple seasons and even some movies, Hamtaro and his ragtag group of fellow adorable and quirky hamsters would go on adventures and yeah, you know, that was really about it. That was the whole show. And it was awesome. I discovered this show around that time I was first getting into anime too, with the likes of Dragon Ball Z and whatnot, and then to see Tom from Toonami talk about how good Hamtaro was, man, I was a fan ever since. Just be sure to not get this confused with Ebichu, which is a totally different hamster anime. I'll say that much without getting demonetized. Hamtaro did exist before the anime, but in a very small capacity. There was some early animation where Hamtaro wore a shirt, and that's weird. He's much better when he's naked. And even before that, there was this educational magazine for Japanese school children where Hamtaro would like stare your soul into submission, I guess. It's clear that the anime is when things started to peak. Dude, even the theme song was so good. Good enough to have the lyrics altered by protesters in Bangkok against the government of Thailand. Oh man, I did not expect to see that on the series Wikipedia page, I can say that much. Hams unite to take down the government, I guess. So yeah, this became a pretty notable franchise. Of course, with success on their hands, video games were soon to follow. Yeah, there is a mobile game, there's also an old PC game as well, but I just can't believe that Nintendo would publish most of them. Dude, some are even made by Alpha Dream. What is this company? This may come off as me scraping the bottom of the barrel of Nintendo content to talk about for you guys on the internet, but trust me, there's a whole lot more to this than you could ever possibly imagine. I have played every game in this franchise, and I'm here to tell you, we got some fun times ahead. So, without any further ado, it's Hamtaro time. Hushy hushy, ticky ticky woo. Some of you may be expecting me to start with the Game Boy Color classic Hams Unite, but actually that's not the first game in the series. In Japan, that game has a nice big 2 attached to it, which begs the question, why was the first game, Totoko Hamtaro Tomodachi Daisuken Dechu, never get localized? Because it's a hamster simulator. That's why. Obviously, there's a big language barrier to work around here, though I can tell the game asks me for my blood type along with all my other information, so, you know, I always thought that little nugget was missing from the Pokemon games. I tried so hard to figure out if there was actually a game here, but I don't know, man. I couldn't find it. I don't know what to say to that one. Definitely didn't think I was gonna see Hamtaro jump today. I'm really not sure why this is the case, but it turns out Hamster Simulator is actually a full-on genre, mostly in Japan. You got the Hamster Paradise series, there's Kisuke Hamster, Hamster Monogatari is another series, with one of them even showing up on the N64. I guess in Japan, Hamtaro with this genre made total sense. It does in retrospect, but like, why are there so many hamster games? It's no surprise this one didn't get localized. We already got our deformed pets games. We were totally fine at the time. But now we move on to the good stuff. Hams Unite. Developed by Pax Sofnica, a company that I'm pretty sure no one's heard of, but trust me on this, they also worked on Mole Mania. This is a good group of developers right here. I'm really glad Nintendo had a go-to developer for their furry rodent-themed video games. Worked out great for them. It's kind of strange that this one is considered a sequel in Japan. I mean, Hamtaro's in it, sure, but this is a totally different beast. I mean, look at him. What a beast he is. Looks like we have a conundrum on our hands. Hamtaro doesn't know ham chat. Unbelievable. On top of that, all of your friends have gone missing too. Well, since Boss can't be bothered to go and hunt for anyone himself, leave it to our hero to fill out the dictionary and repopulate the hamster hideout himself. From there, you kinda just wander around a bunch. You pick up food, talk to locals, gather items for those who need them, occasionally dabble in blackmail, and fill up your ham chat book. And really, that's the best part of the game. Each word is associated with this adorable little gesture, and like, oh my god, this game is so cute. That is the main takeaway to get out of this. It's just, oh man, oh look at him do the thing. Oh, that's adorable. We kind of work with an old school point and click mentality with this actually. Whenever you come in contact with anything, just try every option available to you and hope it's the right one. Eventually you'll get it right. Sometimes it leads to progression, sometimes it's just another cute animation, sometimes you almost die. It's a lot of fun. Ooh, a cave, what's in here? Shush, we'll get caught. Think I just stumbled across a crime scene. Alright, how do we get the scarf from this bird? What do you mean peeing didn't work? Damn it. Much love to this salesman too, by the way. He just begs you to buy whatever he's trying to peddle at the moment and does so with this really catchy song playing in the background. I love it. It's my favorite part of the game. Okay, wait, no, I lied. My actual favorite part of the game has to be pretty late into the adventure, where you basically kill a man, he screams for his life on the way down, and Hamtaro goes, oh yeah, you know, let's put that scream in the dictionary. Oh my god. You see, that's the thing with these games now. They are oddly compelling. You may think it's just a kid's game, you give it to little Jimmy or Sarah, it'll shut them up for a while, but no, not at all. Hamtaro has a body count now. Bringing all of your ham friends back to the hideout is only part of the journey. You do so, get to see a sick party take place, but the adventure truly isn't over until you fill up that dictionary. It isn't until you hit Boss with that ham-tast when you're all filled up, and then he gives you the final word, Great Chew, the book cover changes. Oh, and that's it now. Ah, oh, damn, you know what? That's pretty anticlimactic, I'm not gonna lie. Where's my gripping narrative, game? Well, considering how all over the place the Game Boy Color exclusive lineup was, I guess, by default, that makes this one of the best Nintendo exclusives on the console, so, hey, congrats are in order, my ham friend. Good job. Maybe the sequel is even better. Ham Heartbreak for the Game Boy Advance. Enter player name, huh? Bijou is playable in this one too. Interesting. I am original and funny. Clearly I didn't watch enough of the anime because, my god, Hamtaro has a villain? This is Spat, a character that apparently only showed up in 3 episodes of the show and was strong enough of a character to become the focal point of a video game. Good for him. Ooh, and what a villain he is. Essentially, he just randomly goes about his day finding happy people and doing whatever he can to ruin love for them. Basically a standard Twitter user, the more I think about it. Well, naturally, we can't have that. Come on, Sonic. Come on, Sonic. You have to save the day. Oh no, we got the dictionary wet. Losing all of the information inside in the process? Somehow? Well, I guess we've forgotten all the words now and have to go get them all over again. It's like a Metroid game all of a sudden when Samus would lose all of her powers randomly. The game certainly looks a whole lot better now that it's on better hardware, but essentially, it is basically the same idea. Pick up food, talk to the locals, gather items for those who need them, partake in high-speed action scenes and make Hamtaro scared for his life, and then fill up your ham chat book. You know, same game. It's just that rather than being solo, Bijou joins you for most of the ride, and rather than bringing your friends back to the hideout, you mend broken hearts of anybody that stands in your way. This does include your friends, but basically anybody could be hit by Spat's evil ways. You're not so much of a matchmaker as you are a match repairer, and you know, that's still a pretty respectable job. Playing both of these games back to back and needing to fill out the dictionary with all of these words that you already had before is a bit annoying, but there is a whole slew of new words birds with much more fleshed out animations too. This game is still cute as ham heck. Let's not kid our ham selves here. This game is mother hamming adorable. Big fan of Liberty, where they just randomly pull out a Statue of Liberty cosplay. Amazing. They look fabulous. There's Bloat Tea, which introduces inflation to the franchise. Good. And Rub Rub. You're free to insinuate anything you want about this in the comments below. It's not all the same game though, there is definitely a lot more done here to spice things up from time to time. Many of the tasks that you have to accomplish are more dynamic than before, when they were just mostly static. There's a volleyball segment, a dancing minigame where you plan out your entire routine to get graded on. There's like a genuine boss fight, like, what? The environments are a bit all over the place as well. Ham Hams Unite tried to stay a lot more grounded and realistic with its locations, but here in Heartbreak, we have a theme park with the hamster roller coaster, and I mean that alone is way out of the boundaries of what we had before. There is more of the same, but it's a lot more polished. There is no denying that. There were some moments that were pretty aimless where I needed a random word that I just happened to miss because I didn't talk to every single NPC in the previous area. That kind of sucked, but in general, it's still a good time. Dude, okay, spoilers, I guess, but when you get to the end of the game and need help building a catapult to get to Spat's evil lair, you need to get a special spoon to do so. Only obtainable after getting 3 special gems, something pretty easy to come across, and then... Oh, Ganon's not gonna see this coming, I tell you what. And by far, my favorite part of the game, it's technically not even a part of the game, it's stuff that was taken out, but the code is still there, and this is amazing. Partway into the game, there's this segment where our heroes go on a boat trip to a different area, and in the final product, the game just cuts from one area to the next after getting onto the boat, and it's fine, you don't really think much about it. Well, initially, there was going to be a cutscene referencing one of the iconic moments from the Titanic. This is real, and there was going to be a rendition of My Heart Will Go On by Celine Dion playing in the background. This is a real thing that almost happened. Okay, so I'm not going to pretend to be like a Titanic expert or anything like that, but I think this implies that Hamtaro dies. Ham Heartbreak really has no right to be as enjoyable as it is. I'm starting to understand why Nintendo put so much money into this franchise. Ham Hams Unite was a nice, charming, fun adventure, and this is just way better. It can only go up from here, I guess. Things are about to get even crazier. Next up, the, sort of the end of the Hamtaro adventure game trilogy. Here we have Rainbow Rescue, releasing in Japan, Europe, and not America for some reason. Not sure why that happened. But the craziest part of all, this was developed by Alpha Dream, the team that brought us Mario and Luigi and Tomato Adventure. Yes, Hamtaro Rainbow Rescue is also their baby. Okay, well, I guess it was time for someone new to give these hamsters a shot. I can't believe it. Oh no, you guys, it looks like the Rainbow Prince bow has fallen. That's not good. Apparently, this being is able to make rainbows with his umbrella. That's pretty cool, but it's lost its power after losing its colors. Oh darn. Well, alright, simple enough I guess. Go with your friends and scavenge the land for items that have the core colors that you need and save the day. But you know, first things first here, we gotta partake in a little bit of coloring. You're gonna give me a coloring book as soon as the game starts. Of course I'm gonna take advantage of it. There you go. Sonic the Hamster. My fan character is real now. One thing that is immediately apparent with this game, the sprite work has gotten a massive upgrade. Heartbreak was just a bit of a polished version of Unite, which was fine, but wow, you get a little bit of extra budget in there and rework all the sprites, it looks so good. Especially those character portraits, man, great looking stuff all around. The shading is immaculate, or dare I say, Hamaculate, I guess. Rainbow Rescue actually released a few months before Superstar Saga did, and it is very evident in both that art direction is one of this team's strong suits. Alpha Dream really knew how to get those pixels to look really nice. On the surface, it may seem like this is more of the same once again, except now you control a whole slew of hamsters at the same time instead of just 1 or 2, but no. Actually, the entire gameplay loop has been completely modified. and I think for the better. There's still plenty of locals to talk to and ham-has to throw around at your leisure, but now minigames take center stage in almost everything you do. The world is filled with tasks to complete, simple little minigames that get you from one place to another, secure an item that you need, stuff like that. And rather than being restricted from progression because of a word that you just simply couldn't think of, sometimes you need a specific hamster for a task that you haven't recruited yet, and then there you go. You get the one that you need, since not everybody can do everything this time around, and you move on with your day. Considering Superstar Saga's main gimmick was partnering brother with brother like at all times, it's pretty wild to think that this game works with a similar concept. I mean, it makes sense, they were both being developed around the same time, but the parallels. I didn't think I'd be comparing Mario to Hamtaro, but here we are. Also, since dialogue and the actions happen a lot quicker, and we have a much more standard form of progression now with story segments revolving around a specific color and then you move on, the pace has quickened up dramatically from what it used to be. That aura of sort of being lost and kind of just wandering around aimlessly until you talk to the right person with the right word, that's no longer here. Thank goodness. Plus, the whole minigames needing specific hamsters thing adds a whole lot of personality to these characters that mostly just relied on text in the previous games. There is a lot of genuine thought put into this. Now ultimately, all jokes aside, this is still a kid's game, and me, the grown adult, playing a game that's way out of his target demographic may not have the best judgment call here, but these games are pretty good. I mean, there's no committing crimes, there's no narrowly avoiding death, there's no narrowly causing death, but it's still pretty good. There may be some of those weird twisted things at the end of the rainbow that I haven't seen yet, but even without that, it's still enjoyable, I guess. You see, that's one of the problems when you have a genuinely solid game to talk about. There's less interesting things to say. I mean, good for the game, I guess. Alpha Dream did the impossible here and hit the ground running with Hamtaro. That's so cool. But if you're looking for more of that blackmail and aura of death stuff that the previous adventures gave you, that's not gonna be here. Hopefully your thoughts on the game don't hinge on that fact. But now, for all intents and purposes, this is the end of the sort of, I don't know, like it's a Hamtaro trilogy, I guess. We have 3 games of a similar gameplay style where each game has very noticeable upgrades as we move forward, while each staying very enjoyable in their own right. These are pretty good, I gotta say. These are actually really fun. Alpha Dream would go on to make a few other games for the franchise, but none of them really hit the high marks of before. Next on the docket, we have Hamtaro, the Ham Games. As you can probably figure just based on the artwork, we got a sports-themed minigame collection here. Interestingly enough, this game was released in between Rainbow Rescue's Japanese release and its European release nearly a year and a half later. Why the long delay, you might ask? Well, that's because of Nintendo. Didn't really matter to Japan, I guess, but Nintendo of Europe specifically wanted Ham Games' release to coincide with the 2004 Summer Olympics in Athens, Greece, because of course. Oh man, the world is funny sometimes. We got racing, tennis, diving, hammer throw. This is indeed an Olympics-based video game, alright. I have played far too much Mario and Sonic in my life to know exactly what to get out of this. All of the sprite work continues to be great, and for what it is, it plays fine, but I think I'm mostly just upset that the era of Hamtaro adventure games is dead now. This is a fine enough minigame collection, but I didn't want this. I was able to change the main hamster greeting though from ham-ha to "Suh, dude." So I mean, that's something. And then we can jump to the DS and, well, unfortunately things don't really get any better. There's a quiz game that didn't release outside of Japan, so that's a total bust. And then there's a game that did get localized. Hi Hamtaro, Ham Challenge. It's another minigame collection, but catered for a much tinier child demographic. It's pretty brain dead, honestly. The previous minigame collections were like kind of Mario Party themed. They were easy, but you still had to put some thought into it. Here, nah, these are for children still trying to develop their basic motor skills. Sadly, before we knew it, Hamtaro had entered licensed game purgatory before fading out into relative obscurity. Alpha Dream should not have messed with the good thing, man. Maybe they wouldn't be bankrupt right now if that was the case. Okay, maybe that one was mean. It's crazy, man. I knew for years that Nintendo published these games, and it was always this neat little nugget of trivia that I had in the back of my head, but when you really look at everything this series had to offer, this was one hell of a rabbit hole. Or hamster hole, I guess. The Mario and Luigi developers were involved. One of the games was tied to the Olympics. There's the Cut Titanic scene. That is fantastic stuff. At the end of the day, what I'm calling the Hamtaro Adventure Trilogy offered plenty of entertainment for the hours I put into it. The other games, not as good, but it made that Adventure Trilogy all that sweeter. So that's really cool, and I definitely recommend you check them out, especially if you like cute things like this thing. And really, when you really see just how many of these games released and Nintendo made sure they were exclusive, they put money behind this franchise, it just begs the question, why did Hamtaro not get into Smash but Sora did? That's all I have to say. I'll leave you with that. Bye-bye. Like many others out there, the existence of Princess Peach Showtime for the Nintendo Switch had me feeling a bit nostalgic for Peach's first adventure on the DS, Super Princess Peach. And yeah, you know, I just wanted to play it again. Before, during, and after Showtime's release, I've been slowly making my way through Super Princess Peach, and I've now fully completed it. And, you know, I normally save this for brand new modern games, but screw it, special occasion. So, I've been playing Super Princess Peach for the Nintendo DS, and I just want to talk about it. Not like this is an original idea at all, that, you know, there's only 2 Princess Peach games, you know? Surely, a lot of people out there are like, oh, there was that one time Peach had a game, but if you actually played it, I don't know. I figured it could be a fun discussion to just realize whether or not this game has, you know, stood up to the test of time, and if it was ever good in the first place. And I'm here to tell you, it's fine. The thing that got me really interested in this game and its general placement in like the general Mario timeline is when it released, a few months before New Super Mario Bros. And like the idea that a 2D Mario game, even though it's not Mario, it's Peach, but a 2D Mario game released in this weird pocket of time in between Mario World and Mario Land 2 and New Super Mario Bros. Is fascinating to me. It's really fascinating because NSMB, you know, that everyone was talking about how that was the main foundation for a lot of Mario games for like the following decade plus, but no, this here has none of that. This is doing its own unique thing with a lot of aesthetics taken from Mario World, Yoshi's Island. It's interesting. That's just an interesting little fun fact of trivia. So on this adventure, Bowser, in his infinite wisdom, decides to change up his entire game plan. Instead of taking Princess Peach captive, he goes ahead and takes over Mario, Luigi, and a bunch of Toads. You know, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It's just, you would think they would fight back. That's all they normally do, but no, all we see is a bunch of Koopas went into the castle, and now they're taken. I don't know, this wasn't their day. Bowser also has in his hands the Vibe Scepter, which lets him change the emotions of his troop, as well as all these Toads just losing their mind, not having any idea what emotion they should have in that one very moment. And we can't have that, that's a problem. So now Peach, with her trusty parasol Perry, go out and do the same thing Mario typically does, but now to save Mario. That's such a plot twist, that's crazy. And then what follows for a few hours is just a pretty run-of-the-mill platformer. Like, I kind of understand why, when it comes to Princess Peach Showtime, they didn't do a lot of throwbacks to this game, because ultimately, there's not a whole lot mechanically that sticks out about this that isn't rooted in a bit of a weird decision. On the touchscreen are 4 different emotions: happy, anger, sadness, and I guess bliss. It's like happy 2. There's like 2 happy ones. It's like happy and then happy. You got 2 options. And at the flip of a switch, you can change your emotions whenever you feel like it, as long as this bar in the top screen is full. And yeah, it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird, like the whole thing with this game and being able to change emotions on the fly the first time you're playing as a female protagonist in this game, and then the commercials for this game back in the day were like, oh, girls are even just as good as boys are in war. Like, it's weird. They very clearly like didn't have a ton of brilliant ideas when it came to pushing this game. They just wanted to make a Peach platformer and then said, how can we make this work? And they made a lot of weird choices. But when you look past that, once again, it's a perfectly fine platformer. If anything, it's a lot more similar to Yoshi's Island than it is a typical Mario game because it's all about exploration. Every level has 3 toads that you can find, there's no time limit, just go and explore to your heart's content, and eventually you make it to the end, and even the end of level thing is very similar to the wheel at the end of Yoshi's Island. There's a lot of Yoshi's Island influence in this. But I will say, as much as it is a weird idea that the whole emotion thing exists in the first place, it is used to a pretty good effect because not only does Peach have the ability to change her emotions, but a lot of the enemies also have different variants where they have different emotions too, and the way you deal with them is different depending on what they're going through in that moment. Like whenever the Goombas are crying, they can move really fast because they just can't control themselves. They gotta go really fast. It's the same thing that Peach does when she's sad. You got angry Koopa Troopas that'll charge at you instead of just walking around all slow. You got angry Boos, and these guys are pretty cool because they start to go after you when you're looking at them, and that stuff, you know, it is pretty cool. It does change your preconceived notions of how every single one of these enemies can be dealt with, and I like that. As weird as the emotion gimmick is, it's played to a pretty decent effect right there. And for Peach's very first ever solo adventure, she's pretty fun to control, like pretty standard stuff. You know, she can jump, you can get the ability to float with the parasol. She has a pretty fun slide that you can pull off. I like that. And yeah, the emotions can be kind of fun to deal with too. There are plenty of platforming moments that really take advantage of the crying stuff where you gotta speed through some platforms and really deal with your reflexes. I like that stuff. When you get angry, you get a whole burst of fire around you and there are some wooden things you can burn, like that's kind of cool. Some platforms way up in the air so you can be gleeful and float up to it. Like it's not just a weird gimmick, you like just mentioning it. Like gameplay wise, it is neat. Like the exploration stuff with the emotions, it does make for a pretty fun time where every level was fun to explore. I'll give it that. It's just there's not a whole lot that's super memorable with this adventure because there are no 2 levels that really feel different. A lot of the game just feels very samey throughout the entire thing. Outside of the zipline segments, like every so often they throw a zipline segment at you where you throw parry up and then you just glide down with the parasol. Like that's kind of cool. Those parts were fun. There's also like a submarine part that pops up every so often. That was kind of cool too. The game needed more stuff like this because otherwise it just feels like a poor man's Yoshi's Island. Like we have Yoshi's Island at home, which is funny because it actually does end up feeling a little more like a brand new Yoshi's Island game than Yoshi's Island DS, which felt kind of derivative. It's interesting. This is just a weird game. But yeah, in general, it is just a pretty fun standard platformer. There's a generic grass world, there's a kind of generic woods world, there's a mansion world, a lava world, a beach world, a snow world. Like we weren't dealing with anything creatively here. It's a bare basic Mario game. Like that's just what this is. And as a result, it ends up being fine for the most part, but there are some decisions here that I'm not a fan of, and it's definitely indicative of the time. Like for one, before every boss fight, there's a touchscreen minigame. These suck. Like listen, I love gimmicky stuff as much as the next guy with my Nintendo games, I really truly do, but there's a time and a place for these things, and picking a boss level and then having to like shoot Peach into the air, and if you screw up, it's all the way back to the bottom. Like that's not fun. And then if you go to replay the boss fight, you can skip it anyway. So it's like these really add nothing of value. There's even some microphone components in here too, which, oh boy, as much as I love the DS, that microphone, maybe it's just me. I never liked dealing with this thing. That being said, the boss fights, when you get to them, are actually kind of cool because they handle the different emotions in different ways. Like the first fight being Petey Piranha, he opens his mouth, and hey, you've probably played Mario Sunshine, you know that water makes him fat, so you climb up, you get the waterworks going, he gets fat, and there you go, that's kind of cool. But yeah, Petey Piranha, King Boo is there, the Gooper Blooper from Sunshine, this brand new bird, I think his name was Who. There's like a ice dinosaur in there too. Like the variety is kind of there for the bosses, so I'll give him credit. Similar to New Super Mario Bros., these games brought brand new bosses into the scene, and that's awesome. You know, before the Koopa Kids took over everything, it's cool to see bosses that you didn't know what to deal with when you first saw them, and then you see something like Gooper Blooper in 2D for the first time. That's cool. The boss fights were definitely the highlight of this game. There's even a shop, and this is kind of cool too. All the coins that you're gathering throughout the levels you can use as currency in the shop to get new abilities, and mostly just get stuff to fill up your little glossary of music and puzzles for post-game stuff. Like, it's not really all that great, but the fact that it's there is kind of cool. That's a thing that you don't see in Mario games, like, barely ever. Mario Wonder had an in-game shop, but that's how many years after? That's kind of cool that it's here. But that leads to my biggest issue with this game, is that to really beat it, you have to get every single Toad in all of the previous levels. You can't fight Bowser beforehand. That's dumb. That's like Super Mario World, you can't fight Bowser until you get all the dragon coins. That's dumb. That is a dumb, stupid thing, and there's a lot of bloated replayability in here because it's already kind of offensive enough that you have to replay all the levels that you didn't fully complete before. but this part kind of got me mad, I'm not gonna lie. Once you beat the game and you beat Bowser, then you have a whole new slew of levels that you get to play in all the worlds. That's kind of cool, but they also throw in new collectibles in the existing levels that you already went through, so you have to go through every single level again if you want to 100% this. I did not like that. Just weird decisions. But you know what, at least, spoilers I guess, but the Bowser fight is pretty cool whenever you get there, because it does the same thing that I enjoy with a lot of other boss fights, like in a lot of Nintendo games, that when you have a certain skill set as a player character, I think it's really cool when the final fight uses those same skills. So Bowser changing up his emotions on the fly whenever he wants, it's cool. It makes sense for this game, and I'm a fan of that. But I did, at the very least, enjoy the minigames that you get access to after you buy them from the shop. I did these at the very last moment, like after I did all the levels, this is what I did. And this is kind of cool. There's a Toad jumping game with the microphone where you gotta blow to make Toad jump. You know, that's not great, but it could be worse. There's tapping balloons, and that's fine. But the guiding the Toad through the fire, I like that one. See, I like gimmicky stuff in my Nintendo games. This was just as bare bones basic of a touchscreen game as you can get, and I had a good time. So to answer the initial question, does Super Princess Peach for the DS still hold up? Kinda? Maybe my metric for what makes a really quality platformer is just super low. Like, I love platformers, so the fact that this is a functional one, it looks, you know, cutesy, the music is very charming. You know, it's fine, but it really is like a 2 to 3 hour game that they stretch out for 3 times that length with all that extra backtracking that they make you do to just complete it. Yeah, it's not a huge fan of that, but once again, it's just interesting to go back to a 2D Mario game or a Mario adjacent game that came out before NSMB, because like there are some enemies in here that were from Super Mario World and haven't really been seen since. So it's just interesting that that was the last major Mario game to pull from at the time before NSMB changed everything. So go ahead and let me know down below if you've played Super Princess Peach recently, if you felt the nostalgia wave like I did. If you haven't, and you played the game years ago, let me know what you think as well. And quite frankly, I'm just riding a DS nostalgia high now, so there will probably be more DS discussion videos in the future. Let me know what you're playing in general down below. Super Princess Peach, I will say Showtime is better. So, there's that. When you really look at Mega Man as the huge franchise it is, one of the most fascinating parts about it is the multiple series that are found within. Like many others, I was all about the classics growing up, not diving into the more serious themed X series until way later on. And I discovered that what I had been missing out on this entire time was this attempt to not only make Mega Man a series of fun games, but to create this dystopian world with darker overtones revolving around a massive war and including stronger reasons for fighting rather than just doing it because this old doofus was the bad guy. Mega Man Zero always eluded me. Back during the GBA era, I was too busy playing Mega Man Battle Network 2. That was my game of choice. I was also busy avoiding that Mega Man in base port like the plague that it is. Oh man, they thought that was a good idea. So, once the Mega Man Zero ZX Legacy Collection became a thing, I figured this is the perfect time to see what I've been missing out on. I've heard plenty of good things, so I'm pretty sure I'm in for a good time. Also, special thanks to Capcom for hooking me up with the code for this game. You guys are gonna get 2 episodes out of this, so don't say I never did nothing for you. So yeah, Zero and ZX all in one package. Marketing wise, you may as well give the buyer the best bang for their buck. while also making the relatively hard to find Mega Man Zero collection on DS less desirable, as far as I'm concerned. While the names of these two series may be different, this is actually a 6-game long overarching plot. It's something that X kinda had going for it too, but it kinda relied heavily on having a new villain take the center stage every time before the evidently immortal Sigma shows up regurgitating the same Maverick speech over and over again, and in my opinion, it got pretty old. Not here though. From beginning to end, this is a story and world mostly built around consistency, which is actually super cool. There are still plenty of differences between the two series though, so this time we're gonna primarily stick to good old red here, Zero. When diving deep into the lore that led into these games, honestly, it can be a bit confusing, considering the X series was supposed to end with Game 5, and despite Zero getting sealed up for 100 years at the end of X6, he shows up in X7 anyway. Continuity be damned, my poor little brain hurts. But this is where relative newcomers Inti Creates come in, to try and make sense of things, and create a series that stands out on its own. Right off the bat, in Zero 1, you can tell things are serious. You have a girl and some troops running away from a bunch of robots that look almost exactly like X, as well as these huge machines that just come in and plow through everybody. It's wild. It's even crazier in Japan, where those soldiers die a bloody death. Yeah, those 30 red pixels there, they're not gonna fly in the rest of the world. No chance. But it's here where that girl Seal finds the resting Zero. She manages to awaken him, and from there, you begin a 4-game long robot destruction tour as part of the Resistance. And their main opposition is Neo Arcadia, a metropolis that was built so humans and the human-like robots Reploids can live in peace. But apparently, Mega Man X is still around, and he's power hungry, terminating anything that stands in his way of his vision of peace. That sounds pretty weird to me, I don't know about you. And to assist him, there's also the addition of the 4 Guardians, a group of powerful and conveniently elemental-themed Reploids built in his image. Though, along the way, it's discovered that that isn't even X, it's a copy of X, since you still receive guidance from the real X. This all leads to a large-scale power struggle against multiple parties, with many twists and turns happening along the way across all 4 games. New faces do come and go with each one, but everything in this series is all about that battle between the Resistance and the evil forces controlling Neo Arcadia, with some ulterior motives peeking in the further you progress into the story. And even still, there is an ultimate villain in Dr. Whale, but he doesn't even show up until Zero 3, which is after a mere tease at the end of Zero 2, and you don't even get to see the fruits of his labor until Zero 4, which actually adds some context and substance to the plot points in the previous games, including Zero 1. All of these games' stories are connected, and the wildest part of all, it's actually really good. We have come a long way from cranky old man pretends to be an alien for 30 seconds. To me, this level of consistency is genuinely impressive. At all times, it feels like you're constantly playing a part in this ever-evolving war, and by the time Whale shows up, the stakes grow to such a level that it's really easy to care about Seal, the resistance force that she's put together, and Zero being the critical unit to see her plan through to the end. Each game is set up as a series of missions, and unlike other Mega Man series where you go and stop the bad robot from doing the bad thing in their conveniently themed location, every time you embark on a mission in Zero, it's to play a part in stopping the enemy's overall goal. Heat Genblem here isn't just a laser beam shooting turtle with a weird name, he's the power source of a massive particle beam. Noble Mandrago isn't just a fabulous looking plant-based robot, though she is certainly that. She is responsible for speeding up erosion in Area Zero, one of the only habitable areas left on the planet. And in Game 2, we have a one-off character working alongside us, El Paizo. He only shows up in that one game, but his inclusion to the story was to show the power of this world's massive energy source, Cyber Elves, or more specifically, the Dark Elf. A character that would be nothing more than a relative throwaway suddenly becomes pivotal in understanding what this battle is all about. This is Mega Man here, and we're getting all this story that actually kinda makes sense? That's really cool. The things you do in these games actually matter. You're not just running and shooting for the sake of it, and if you play all these games through an order, you're actually rewarded with a really well done story with a compelling beginning, middle, and satisfying end. What a novel idea that is. But if the story is good while the gameplay suffers, it wouldn't really amount to a whole lot, but luckily, the gameplay is really good too. Similar to other Mega Man series, each Zero game essentially plays the same, just with a bunch of little tweaks here or there. Some good, some bad. Pick a mission, run through a level, die to a boss plenty of times until you learn the pattern and defeat it, go through a gauntlet at the end featuring a boss rush. I don't know why all 4 games do this. I figured at this point in history we would agree that this is just a ploy to artificially lengthen a game's overall time, but whatever, it's here. Fight the big baddie at the end, credits. All 4 games operate this way, with 2, 3, and 4 doing the tried and true boss selection screens that we're used to. Meanwhile, 0-1 goes for a mission list instead, which actually kind of made the whole thing a bit more confusing since there is still a recommended order to go through, but you may fight a boss at the very end, you might fight just a big enemy. It's all up in the air. It's kind of weird. And since you're not just a Mega Man, but also a Zero, you not only have a Buster Gun to work with, but also the Z-Saber to attack in close combat. This is perfect. The action is just about as fast-paced as the X games are, but with the smaller screen size and the modified art style to go along with it, the gameplay is actually better built around having quick reflexes to the enemies that you barely have a chance to see before they attack, and slashing enemies to pieces in general is just inherently more satisfying anyway. On top of that, each game gives you a couple of extra weapons to play around with as well. In particular, 02's Chain Rod and 03's Recoil Rod are so much fun to use. Both of these weapons are not only cool tools that you can use as a substitute for the saber, but they both lead to some really awesome platforming segments as well. When Mega Man Zero is good, it's all about flow, stringing together your movements and attacks in such a way that the best way to describe it is smooth, which is why I'm not really so huge on the other weapons that you have access to, like the shield boomerang that you can use throughout most of the series. Not really a fan, I never had fun using it. But when everything finally clicked for me, it was then when I realized that these aren't simply Mega Man games like we're used to on a new console. This is actually more like a 2D version of something like Bayonetta or Devil May Cry. You even get graded at the end of missions like in those games too, depending on how good you perform. That's awesome! And if you manage to maintain S rank, which is incredibly difficult, you gain access to even more abilities at your disposal. Nothing that makes the game impossible if you don't have them, but it's still a cool reason to replay these games to get even better over time. Don't worry, young one, we may all start off as a wounded Edge Boy, but with enough effort we can all strive to be better. Godspeed, Edge Boy. Scratch that. Edge Man. Godspeed. Mega Man 01 is the game that suffers the most here. As soon as you get into 02, the shift immediately goes towards focusing on satisfying combat first, more than interesting platforming, leading into 03, which, I mean damn, that game perfects it. When the series started off though, they clearly didn't really know how to firmly grasp it. You just get bombarded with enemies with no time to prepare, and the level designs are no better. The reliance on leaps of faith is ridiculous. 02 suffers from this occasionally as well, but nowhere near as bad as the first game. There was this one boss fight where I landed the final hit while I was over a pit, and then I was forced to die and redo the fight, so you know, that was fun. Thankfully, the Legacy Collection introduces the option of a ton of checkpoints that also eliminates the life system, letting you retry tough parts a whole lot easier. Honestly, if this wasn't here, I don't think I could see this game through. I know, I'm weak. The game also does a poor job introducing some of the Zero exclusive mechanics. Like, there's no beating bosses to get their weapons here. Kinda. The way you change up how you attack in this series is, as you play, you gain access to modifier chips that give you a slew of new abilities to upgrade your movement options, as well as adding elemental properties to your attacks. The bosses aren't weak to specific weapons, but the elements that you attach to your existing weapons. Since I didn't want to research anything online and I just dived into the game straight, it took me most of 01 to figure that out. I'm such a fake gamer, I'm aware. And then there's also the addition of cyber elves, these little creatures that can do a little bit of everything, actually. Messing with item drops, changing enemies into useless mets, giving you health, stuff like that. And the fancier cyber elves end up being the equivalent of these sub-tanks, but in order to use them, you're required to grind for E-crystals. Like, a lot of them. This applies for weapon upgrades too. The more you use a weapon, the stronger it becomes. The thing is though, 01 was clearly not designed around that idea. Playing this game through like normal leads to an incredibly difficult adventure, only because there's not many opportunities to grind. You need to purposefully take time out of your playthrough to get a bunch of monotonous grinding done with. If you take about a half hour or so to sit there and mindlessly grind, you're in for a much easier time, but that doesn't make for a much better game. But once again though, once you hit 02, things are so much better. The weapons upgrade faster, fewer crystals are required to do anything, and there's also the addition of forms as a way to modify yourself on a grander scale. And that level of customization is a lot of fun. The jump in quality between games 1 and 2 is astounding. 03 would then go on to streamline the Cyber Elf system even more so, giving you a whole lot more freedom of choice, like deciding if the benefits that you want apply only when the elf is equipped, or you can attach them to yourself permanently. The weapon upgrade system was also removed, giving you full access to most of your moves right from the beginning, along with the form system going away in favor of a whole lot more customization chips. 03 is all about playing how you want, and as a result, it is easily my favorite of the bunch. It is so much fun. Oh, and also there's e-reader support. Oh man, yeah, what a time that was. Luckily, the Legacy Collection actually maintains the stuff that you would get with an e-reader, so no worries, Mega Man 03 purists. You can continue to beg for more Battle Network in your life. Believe me, I would do the same thing. As for 04, it is fun as well. I think it's better than 01, but I kind of feel like after basically perfecting everything in 03, they decided to change things just for the sake of it in this one. A new weapon in this game is the Z-Knuckle, and it's weird. Like, it allows you to punch enemies, but you gotta get really up close with them, meaning you're probably gonna get hit, but it also allows you to steal their weapon and use it as your own. Cool in concept, but there is next to no instance where that ends up being the preferable option over the Buster or the Saber. It's just there to be different. The Cyber Elf system was also even more simplified, but in my opinion, too much so. In previous games, you have dozens of elves to choose from. In this one, only one. You can upgrade it a whole lot more than the previous ones, and you can even allocate available points down one of 3 avenues. It's a neat idea, but it eliminates the freedom that was so well done in 03. However, in terms of actual additions, there is now a weather system where each stage has 2 difficulties that depend on how the weather is acting that day, but you can also change the weather whenever you want. The idea is that if you go through the hard version of a stage, you get rewarded with an extra weapon. You ever look at a 7-day forecast and think, oh man, Wednesday has a 70% chance of hard mode? The level design sometimes ends up suffering as a result. This stage here with all the bottomless pits, it's not too bad in easy mode, but now that it's cloudy, you gotta deal with a bunch of clouds blocking where those pits are located, as well as wind making the jumps across them a whole lot more difficult. This is fun! Mega Man 04, like I said, is still fun, but some of the decisions they made were just a bit strange. The way I see it, the series consistently got better with each entry, and then had a bit of a bumpy conclusion. The same can be said for the music too, honestly. Mega Man games typically have really good music, and specifically the soundtracks to 02 and 3, oh, they are awesome. The opening stage in 02, the song Departure, it's so damn good. It's one of the best tracks in the franchise. It has its ups, it has its downs, but on the whole, the Mega Man 0 series is pretty sweet. I gotta say, I'm very impressed. I clearly missed out by not playing these games earlier. There are some rough edges here or there, specifically with that first game, but man, when a Mega Man 0 game does something good, it is great. Mega Man 0, the way I see it, is the only Mega Man sub-series that blends together a compelling series-wide story with really satisfying gameplay. So as long as you can get past the, let's call them challenges in the first game, you are honestly in for a fantastic time. But that only covers 2/3 of the package. With Mega Man 0 out of the way, all we gotta do is press the right button once and then hey, look at that! A new game! Next time we're gonna take a look at Mega Man ZX and its sequel, ZX Advent. Surely playing and talking about 6 games back to back isn't gonna burn me out. Right? Oh boy. So last time, we took a look at the Mega Man 0 series found within the Mega Man 0/ZX Legacy Collection on the Nintendo Switch, courtesy of a review code provided by Capcom. Thank you so much. Whew, boy, that sentence was a mouthful. Today we're jumping ship to newer hardware, the Nintendo DS, with 2 games that I'm actually familiar with because I've owned them ever since they first released. You see, I am a true fan. The Mega Man 0 series was awesome. The high-speed action combined with the high-stakes story led to a fantastic quadrilogy of GBA action games. However, and no spoilers here, that story ends on a pretty conclusive note. You know how people were constantly begging for a Mega Man 11 or a Mega Man X9? Well, we really can't get a 05, otherwise the entire timeline is completely screwed up. even though that hasn't stopped them before. However, Inti Creates, after doing such a good job with Zero, was tasked with continuing on the story while also jumping ship to the Nintendo DS. Mega Man ZX, Mega Man ZX Advent, and that's it. Wow, they really only did 2 games and called it quits. Hell, even Star Force made it to 3. Or 7, if you consider how ridiculous they were with those games. I remember at the time simply wanting Mega Man on DS. While the PSP was getting really good remakes, the continuation of the story with some new gameplay elements were going to be happening on this console instead. I may not be caught up with the story, but I'm sold. On the surface, if you squint your eyes really tightly, this definitely looks like more of the same. And you're not entirely wrong. Rather than taking place as soon as the events of 04 concluded, ZX is actually more of an epilogue story, 100 years in the future. The evil influence of Dr. Whale, or Weil or Vile as so many of you were getting on my case about, is definitely gone, but the Mavericks continue to be an issue. Okay guys, you gotta forgive me, the game is all text and no voice acting. How is I supposed to know how the name is pronounced? So immediately the stage is set for something really cool. But your heroes are just a bunch of chosen ones that don't really have all that much depth in my opinion. Like for the first time ever, you have a choice between 2 characters to play as, Vent or Ale. And it's nothing more than whether you want or... Oh man, who to choose? The characters, in my opinion, aren't as strong as they were back in Zero, both the heroes and the villains. Arguably, now that we have a bigger world to explore, it's simply enough seeing people around and not confined to set locations like they were in Zero, but they do certainly try though. Your main partner, Prairie, is theorized to be Alouette, a little girl Reploid from the Resistance who looked up to CL and considered her an older sister. I mean, come on, they have the same exact stuffed cat doll, they are the same character, it's just not official. Even though it is technically a theory, it is more interesting than anything else going on here that's set in stone. You are simply a vessel that is capable of becoming a Mega Man, and your goal is stopping this game's bad guy, Serpent, from taking over the world. It's really not much deeper than that. And ZX Advent isn't that different either. The character choice is more distinct, admittedly, since Gray is a Reploid boy suffering amnesia, and Ash is a humanoid government worker. But once their unique opening stages are done with, things end up playing out the same for the most part for both campaigns. So once again, it's whether you want or... Woohoo! You do eventually run into the heroes from the original ZX as well, which is kinda neat. They're older too, you can tell because their hair is different. Continuity between the 2 games is certainly appreciated, that was one of Zero's strong points, but this kinda seems like fan service more than anything. They just kinda end up being there. There is still a common thread that ties everything in this new world together. Biometals, mystical artifacts that contain the data of a Reploid or human, and in this instance they allow you to more or less become Mega Man X, Zero, the 4 Guardians, and even Axel. Wow, okay, didn't think we would see much of him after the X games.
I'll help you, if you promise not to leave me.
Yeah man, that's certainly the voice I... Remember, this is actually a neat enough way to include the characters that we're all familiar with without messing up with the timeline. It even leads to some really quality in-game cutscenes with some of that classic Mega Man voice acting. Ah, sick, a Zero reference, much respect. But not only are the good guys here in the form of biometals, but Dr. Weil as well, with Model W. The bad guys want to harness that power and do even more evil things? Go and stop them, that's about it. The story remains pretty basic. There are a few voice blurbs here or there in ZX, but in Advent's case, there's a whole load of honest to goodness, full voice acting. And it is...
Come and cry in my bosom.
Oh.
I'll give you a taste of my special nectar.
Both games also do that Mega Man X thing that I'm really not too much of a fan of. The villains in these are one-offs that leave very little impact on anything that's going on. They try to pull a plot twist in ZX Advent, but there is such a lack of urgency here between both stories. It's almost surprising that these are the same guys who did Mega Man Zero, a story that really tried to get you invested in the in-game war that was taking place. Serpent shows up, he's a jerk throughout the game, you beat him, he's gone, that's it. Partway into Advent, you meet a trio of professors. Soon after, one of them betrays the others, and I guess I'm supposed to care? His name is Albert. That's the same first name as Dr. Wily. Was I supposed to be surprised? Despite all this, the two shining lights here are Pandora and Prometheus, two servants of Model W. These are the only characters that are thorns in your sides through both games, and by the time Advent comes to a close, there are signs of them desiring to backstab the villain of the week, Albert, but then they just disappear, leaving an opening for a third ZX game to actually tell a decent end to the story, but alas, things just end here. There is a decent story here for sure, but the moment-to-moment storytelling is pretty average, and certainly not as impactful as the games that preceded it. The story may be but the major appeal with ZX is the gameplay. Wow, the strong point of a Mega Man game is the running and shooting, how absurd. Oh, and the music is fantastic too. ZX immediately begins with a jam. Green grass gradation, it is so good. So Mega Man Zero was all about a series of linear stages that laid out enemies in such a way to get you to play around with the handful of tools at your disposal in an attempt to reach a really satisfying state of flow. ZX, on the other hand, slows things down quite a bit and also introduces an open world. You still accept missions via a save station, but rather than transporting to a location thanks to technology, now you have to walk there, which requires a whole lot of running back and forth. Oh boy, it's not so bad if you know exactly how to get to your destination. AKA, you may as well pull up a map online, it's for the best. The map in Advent is pretty simplistic, so getting from one place to another is pretty straightforward. The original ZX, on the other hand, my god. But when you really get into the thick of things, this is just more of Mega Man Zero, and in a good way. One of the early stages in ZX is a cool throwback to the highway stage in Mega Man X. I like that. You do some running, some shooting, you take down bosses. It's a Mega Man game, alright. But then of course there are the biometals, replacing the modification chips from Zero. It's really cool being able to essentially play as a multitude of characters all at the push of a button, and they do change things up a decent amount when it comes to movement options or how you fire your weapon. AKA, just play as Model H all the time because you can basically fly. It's the best. ZXA also changes things up by making Model A your primary form and not ZX, meaning you have no saber to work with until late into the game. Being able to mainly shoot a gun certainly feels more Mega Man, but I would be lying if I said I didn't prefer the idea of going through the whole game with a sweet sword. It's the only game out of the 6 where you can't primarily do that. In general though, each transformation also changes up the bottom screen a little bit. Pretty nice, this was still at a time where simply having a second screen was a pretty big deal, and if anything, nowadays it allowed Capcom to figure out a way to emulate DS games without needing two screens, and letting you use an analog stick to control the touchscreen. With a handful of different screen layouts too, this is actually super nice. Yeah, you remember when Nintendo thought this was a good idea for a layout? You should be ashamed of yourselves. While the biometal system is really cool, Advent goes the extra mile and also allows you to transform into the 8 main bosses. Not gonna lie, it's not that great. At this point, you have over a dozen different choices to transform into, and the level designs really go out of their way to say, hey, these are actually useful, see? We put a hole in the floor for some reason, use the B. I don't know, playing as the bosses is inherently a cool thing for a Mega Man game, but transforming into them here, it just doesn't feel natural. And since none of them are as fluid in their movements as the biometals, they only end up being pulled out because the game reminded you that they exist, at the sacrifice of that flow that these games were previously special for. I get that it's also technically a Metroidvania, so having more options to gather goodies is basically a requirement, but the implementation of such feels forced in my opinion, and I think it would have been better off upgrading the existing biometals instead. For example, Chrono Force can slow down time. Cool. But we also already have a water biometal with Model L. Wouldn't it just make sense to combine the two, give Model L the ability to slow down time, and then just eliminate this huge chunk of a thing? I'm pretty sure also I only transformed into Bifrost once to break up these random blocks, and that was it. This seems so unnecessary. That being said, these really aren't that big of a deal. For the most part, these transformations are optional, so quite frankly, they're harmless. I just think it was a weird move. Some of the budget that went into these guys probably should have went towards upgrading the script instead.
I'm going to go ahead and meet our booty face to face.
Alright, now hardcore ZX and Advent fans, put your pitchforks down. I know I've been doing a lot of nitpicking, but really at the end of the day, These games are fine. The story may not be super compelling in my eyes, but it gets the job done, and the gameplay may not be as solid and a bit all over the place in terms of its ideas, but it's still enjoyable enough from start to finish. These games are fun, and arguably that's all you can ask for. I think the Mega Man Zero games are way better, especially structurally, but I gotta hand it to the devs for giving a Metroidvania Mega Man game a shot. Mega Metroidvania. In terms of the Legacy Collection, Zero was clearly the selling point here, but ZX and Advent's inclusion make perfect sense, not just because they're from the same devs, but because these two games act as epilogues to the previous series stories. They may not be as impactful as the Zero games, but elements from them definitely linger over into these, and it does help if you did play the Zero games before this. There are plenty of goodies packed in this collection too. By connecting ZX with 0, 3, or 4, either with the cartridges on DS or by the menu in the Legacy Collection, you can battle a handful of the bosses from those games. There's also a secret boss fight with Omega. Story-wise, his inclusion makes no sense, but gameplay-wise and from a fan service perspective, you get to fight against a fully powered Zero, and he's really tough, which is awesome. And then you can play as him. It's late game, so by this point you're already used to Model ZX, so you don't really care all that much, but hey, still really cool. Both games also feature side quests aplenty, so if you really want to invest time into this world, take a break from saving it and find a piece of love fruit. Why not? The end of the world can wait. And why not have a few extra mini-games too to sweeten the deal? Most prominent of which being Mega Man A, an 8-bit classic Mega Man styled level with a ZX facelift. It may not seem like a big deal nowadays, but this was before the huge retro revival boom that would start a year or so after this game's release. Having the newest of Mega Man worlds attached to the most classic of Mega Man gameplay styles? I think that's really cool. And this is where the story gets a little bit more interesting. While we may never know if a third ZX game is ever going to happen, even though it would make sense, the developers took matters into their own hands. Inti Creates is far from an unknown name in the Mega Man universe. I'm assuming Mega Man A was simply a test, because soon after, the world would see them be the minds behind a full classic game in Mega Man 9, and a couple years later, Mega Man 10. They would then go on to create their own character, Gunvolt, and by the time of Zero ZX Legacy Collection's release, this character would amass a series of 5 games, some being based on the classics, and some clearly being influenced by Mega Man Zero. So while we may not know if Capcom will ever continue the Zero or ZX lines themselves, well, at least we have something else that'll give you that fix. I haven't played much of these games yet personally, but the quality is undeniable, and it's just really cool seeing a developer take something they are clearly really good at and doing something successful out on their own. Also, they brought Blaster Master back from the dead, and both of those games are amazing, and they also have Zero in the title, so Inti Creates and the word Zero, match made in heaven. The question is, though, what's next? Certainly a Battle Network Legacy Collection is on the horizon, maybe even a Legends Legacy Collection as well, and then we can have Legends 3 be a thing that'll please everybody, or maybe we can get a Legacy Collection for all the games that got passed over in the previous Legacy Collections. You got the Game Boy games, you got Mega Man X Command Mission, you got Mega Man and Base. No, scrap the whole thing. Wow. Wario is far and away one of the most prolific characters in the entire Mario universe. As a character, well, I mean, he's disgusting, rude, very greedy. Did I mention disgusting? Yeah, you know, he's just a vile human being. But damn, believe it or not, his video game career is far more interesting than that of, say, Yoshi or Donkey Kong. Those two may have higher highs of adventures for sure, but Wario definitely has the weirdest weirds. See, you may think you know a thing or two about Wario because you played a WarioWare game here or there, but I'm here today to tell you things go so much deeper than that.
Oh my god!
This is also going to be a bit of a response to how I feel like the Wario back catalog is so underappreciated. Now sure, the WarioWare series is fantastic, those games are really good, they deserve all the respect in the world, but that is only one of the 3 pillars of Wario. You see, it's like a W. Of course, we got WarioWare, like I just said. I'm assuming most of you are already well familiar. We have the second pillar being Wario Land, the series that brought the character to the dance in the first place. But pillar 3, that's kind of like, what? Like many other Mario side characters out there, the amount of appearances Wario has made over the years is staggering. Sure, if Mario's out there playing a sport, Wario is sure to follow suit and mess things up. That is no surprise, but I'm talking about showing up in places you would never expect. Wario's a bit of an odd guy, you know. Why would you expect not to be playing Densetsu no Staffy 3 on Game Boy Advance, make it to World 8, and then have him randomly drop in to help you out on your journey? Why not? He has a starring role as the worst character in Super Mario 64 DS. I mean, someone had to have that role, it was definitely gonna be him. Baby Wario exists. A consistent reminder that we should be living in constant fear, especially since the mobile Dr. Mario World game gave him a PhD. That's not gonna be good. He has a prominent role in the Mario Picross games in Japan, where he apparently takes the job very seriously. And then we got something like Mario vs. Wario, a pretty nifty puzzle game that actually takes advantage of the Super Nintendo mouse. That dastardly Wario is at it again. He put a bucket on Mario's head. What an evil mastermind. Is that really all it takes to remove any free will from Mario? He just walks like a lemming throughout the entire game, that's it. Just a bucket. Bowser versus Bucket. Bucket always wins. It's sort of like one of the newer Mario vs. Donkey Kong games, actually. Just help the auto-moving character get to Luigi, who's just meandering around for some reason, and don't die along the way. A pretty cool SNES footnote, like how it's the debut and only appearance of Wanda the Fairy, everyone's favorite, but not much more. On the other side of the puzzle spectrum, we have Wario's Woods. This one is a little bit more well-known, I believe. Wario takes refuge in a forest, and Toad is not okay with that. So with the help of another random fairy, no relation to Wanda, blows up every living thing in sight so we can get Wario out of there. As one does. I always somewhat enjoyed Wario's Woods. It's a neat enough puzzle game with some really solid music, and it's the answer to the trivia question, what is the final officially licensed NES game in the US? Kinda cool. Clearly, Nintendo loves this fact. This game has gotten re-releases so many times over the years, while the superior Super Nintendo version has received 0. Yeah, the re-releases may have you think this game doesn't exist, but it does, and it is more or less the same game, but with better graphics and sounds. And there's also a 1v1 story mode featuring characters such as Katsini, Galrog, Mr. Boo. Okay, now I know why this game never got re-released. But it doesn't get any weirder than Wario Blast featuring Bomberman for the Game Boy. Yes, a Wario Bomberman crossover, a reskinned version of Japan's Bomberman GB. I guess they didn't think that was gonna sell, so let's put Wario there for some reason. The story goes, Wario managed to hop into an extra-dimensional portal on his quest to conquer new lands and find new treasure, and just happened to stumble into the world of Bomberman. That's amazing. You could use that as a plot point for any Wario crossover. Why did you stop with Bomberman? And for any of the confused Bomberman fans out there, yes, this is Japan's Bomberman GB, which is different than America's Bomberman GB, which was actually Bomberman GB2 in Japan, and also, on the American box art, features a Bomberman with a gun.
For his neutral special, he wields a gun.
Now, when it comes to WarioWare, the reality of the situation is, while those games are good, you kinda get a similar vibe with every single game. You have a great microgame fill time, 9V is gonna give you a fantastic Nintendo history lesson, and then you're gonna move on. You only got 5 seconds, you gotta move on, and you gotta learn quick. Even when microgames weren't the focus in Game & Wario, or we had weaker microgames but a microgame creator in DIY, those games are fantastic and I highly recommend basically every single one of them. Just don't play WarioWare Snapped. Snapped is trash. It was trash on the DSiWare service. It was like only 25 minutes long, meant to use the camera. It's not good. Not good at all. But look how funny my face is. But today, I want to talk about what I consider to be the best pillar of Wario, Wario Land. This series of platformers spans across the Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, even on consoles. You got a couple of spin-offs, and I gotta tell you, this series is fantastic. It all begins with the Game Boy classic Super Mario Land 2, 6 Golden Coins, one of Mario's most original adventures and in my opinion, one of his greatest. Most of you know this by now, Bowser wasn't the villain in this one, it was the debuting Wario. He took control of Mario's castle while he was off in Sarasa Land trying to save Daisy in the first Mario Land game, and also Mario has a castle apparently. I guess we're just gonna forget about this one. This may seem all fairly random with Wario showing up out of nowhere, but actually, per an official comic from Nintendo Power titled Mario vs. Wario, no relation to the game of a similar name, details the two's childhood friendship, where, in retrospect, Wario felt as if the relationship was incredibly one-sided, and decided to get revenge 20 years later. This is a pretty fun comic in general, actually. Seeing the events of Mario Land 2 in a different light and getting to see kid versions of these characters acting like kids is really charming. It's not like they were just babies with Yoshi, managed to find a PhD along the way, and then boom. Mustache. They must have been living a life. Let's see what that was like. The Mario and Wario dynamic was meant to mimic the rivalry between Popeye and Bluto, and combined with the Japanese word waruri, meaning bad, thus leaving the opportunity wide open to simply flip Mario's M on his cap to a W, it all really wrote itself. Also, the yellow color is like right in between red and green on the color wheel, so even then, that made sense too. Everything about Wario's creation was perfect. But in his very first appearance, well, none of it mattered. A noble effort for sure. I was always a fan of boss fights where the opponent has access to the same powers the hero does, but regardless, guaranteed failure. Even still though, Wario wants a castle to call his own, damn it, which leads us to the events of Wario Land, Super Mario Land 3. Ignore the Mario Land part, it's like Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island, it's just to sell a few more copies and that's it, don't worry about it. Right off the bat, the Wario universe is established as something totally different than anything Mario has done before. Here we are on Kitchen Island, where the fearsome Captain Syrup, with the help of her brown sugar pirates, stole a massive statue of Princess Peach. Yeah, we got a big food theme going on here. Rice Beach, Mount Teapot, SS Teacup. Food is not even a major theme of the game, but sure, why not? Wario's a big guy, let's talk about food for a second. Captain Syrup is going down. And so, in an effort to stand up to his old rival, as well as make some money along the way, Wario sets off on an adventure the likes of which Mario fans hadn't experienced before. For one, things are a lot slower now. Since scrounging up money is the name of the game, exploration plays a strong component here. Many of the stages are the typical linear fare, but throughout the entire island are a bunch of hidden exits, but more importantly, 15 hidden treasures. And to get to those, as well as Captain Syrup's whereabouts, Wario's gotta get through some strange areas and take down even stranger baddies. Except for these little gator dudes. They're not strange, I love them. Everything about this adventure is just sorta surreal. Enemies are just sorta placed haphazardly about, any ones that do stand in your way don't stand a chance up against your massive girth, and a lot of the music has a very eerie vibe to it. What's that, you wanna finally exit the level? Well, you can't until you pay a little toll. Sure, the enemies may not pose much of a threat, but maybe the bosses do. Yes, here we go, the floating head shooting lava rocks out of his nose. Of course, the video game staple. I love this little penguin dude that's an optional boss later on in the game. This is like one of the ugliest dudes I've ever seen. Everything, just everything was done to have Wario operate essentially on the same playing field as Mario, but do things just a little different here and a little different there. It's not anything that we're unfamiliar with nowadays, but this was definitely a pretty bold direction to take back in the early 90s. Ooh, and that final trek to Syrup Castle too. Look at those wavy effects, dude. This is clearly where all the budget went. Like Mario Land 2 before it, making your way to the final boss feels surprisingly imposing. It also helps that said final boss is a freaking genie. Okay. You see, along her travels, Captain Syrup just happened to find a genie lamp and decides to use her wish to defeat Wario. But of course, is defeated himself. I mean, even though he's gigantic, that's still gonna stand no chance against Wario and his gigantic arms and his gigantic butt. Hey, look at that! The Peach statue was in the entire castle the whole time! It is finally ours for the taking. Dude, Mario sucks. But it's alright. Based on how much treasure you got on your journey, you can use your one genie wish to finally get the castle of your dreams. Pick up those 15 treasures along the way, and then boom, Mario wishes his castle was this cool. I'm not really sure why you have one wish for a genie, but you gotta pay him to get the thing you want. There's like a whole bunch of endings that change depending on how much money you have by the end of the game, so that's kind of weird, but okay. Or if you manage to max out your final coin count to all 9s by playing the game legitimately, or cheating by constantly pausing the game, pressing select 16 times, and manipulating the UI to max out your coin count for the final tally of every single level. Man, I miss cool cheat codes so much. You can get something a little extra. You don't get just a simple little castle that way, you get your own Wario planet. And he can breathe in space too, apparently? Man, Wario works in mysterious ways. All these years later, the original Wario Land still holds up fantastically. It's a little slow for sure, which can sometimes be a bit annoying, but overall, this is easily some of the best platforming the original Game Boy has to offer. But before we jump onto Wario Land 2, let's first take a quick detour to the Virtual Boy. That console deserves a little bit of credit, one mention a year. That's all it gets. Virtual Boy Wario Land is notorious for two reasons. One, it is the only game on the console people can agree on it actually being pretty good, and two, it was featured in my very first ever Mario month, so that's pretty cool too. Now yes, best game on the Virtual Boy is definitely like the lowest bar imaginable, but if you have any inkling of checking out this console, don't waste your time with Teleroboxing, you know what I'm saying? It's a similar premise, go and find some treasure and beat up some weird looking goofs along the way, except this time... Whoa, it's like I'm really playing Virtual Boy Wario Land. Of course, we had to have some sort of 3D element shoehorned into this one. It doesn't really add a whole lot to the game. There have been games nowadays like Mutant Mudds that do the same exact thing and better, but hey, for what it is, and considering the time era this came out in, it's fine. There's just not really much to this one, honestly. It's a solid platformer, but each level kinda blends together. It's just the fact that it's competent that makes it seem like such a big deal on the Virtual Boy. The only part of this adventure that really leaves a lasting impression is Demon Head. Dude, imagine seeing this nose in 3D, it would be terrifying. Its lack of depth, no pun intended, really shouldn't be that much of a surprise. Let me just quickly revert the colors back to the red real quick. Yeah, you gotta remember, this is the only console that actively encouraged you to not play its games that often, so enjoy it while you can, but maybe keep some ibuprofen nearby if you play this on real hardware. Which is really the biggest shame of it all too, because the 3DS port was one of the most obvious things in the world for Nintendo to do, and they never did it. What? Nintendo made a dumb decision that actively encouraged emulation even though they could have easily prevented it? Wow, that's crazy. Wario Land 2 though, this is where the series really starts to hit its stride. Captain Syrup is at it again, this time making it personal, infiltrating Wario's castle to steal his treasure. Oh, but they do much more than that. They turn on a big faucet. Oh man, Wario's weird. The core exploration, money gathering gameplay is still here, but now it is executed in a radically different way. For one, it's a lot faster. Wario may be big and bulky, but he's actually super agile too. That iconic shoulder tackle makes a much stronger impact here, no pun intended, than it has before. The levels are also much bigger and the enemies are a lot more twisted in their methods. Wario's flat now. So this is Wario's big new gimmick. You know, Mario can gather items that can make him more powerful, but Wario, dude is immune to death apparently. Let's see how much we can do without raising the game's age rating, you know? Actually, wait, no. Wario literally dies in this one, oops. Fun fact, there's this one form called Crazy Wario that happens when these big penguin dudes hit you with like a ball, I guess. Well, in the Japanese version, they actually are throwing beer at you, and they make you drunk instead. What do you mean Nintendo of America wasn't cool with one of their main characters drinking alcohol? I don't understand what you're talking about. Kirby was making mixed drinks back in Kirby's Adventure, but said nothing about actually consuming them. Come on now, be realistic. The immortality really changes how you handle obstacles too. You are, to be honest, just more threatening than anything you come across, so if you screw up, your main punishment is simply an annoying setback. And this dynamic, in my opinion, really works. You want treasure and you want it now, and you will do literally anything to get to it. Even if it means getting stung by a bee when you're allergic, by God, there's treasure at the end of that allergy. I will make it work. Speaking of, treasures are handled a bit differently as well. Hidden throughout levels are doors that feature matching game puzzles, with the hardest difficulty being some real blink and you miss it type nonsense. Holy cow, that's fast. As well as the end of those levels having a matching number game, used to unlock pieces of a map to eventually access the final level. And by the way, that final level, that's the weirdest of them all too, dude. The walls have like faces and stuff in it, and you just have to accept it. They never explain why this is the way it is. You're going after pirates here. Why is there a face? Alright, at least I get my treasure back, I guess. Just gotta deal with a few mentally scarring issues, but hey, no worries. And soon enough into your adventure, you also kinda realize that there may be way more puzzles than there are actual levels. That's kind of weird. Well, that's because there are actually some alternate pathways. There aren't just a small handful of secret exits for the sake of having secret exits. By changing how you finish a select handful of levels, it ends up putting you down a totally different path with a unique set of stages and boss fights. For example, at the start of the adventure, Wario wakes up to a very loud alarm, then you go out on your way. But what if you decide to sleep through it? Yeah man, why not? Secret pathway unlocked. Ultimately, this doesn't really add a ton to the overall journey. The secret exits are actually pretty easy to find once you have the flow chart, but they're still pretty cool more than anything else. And considering how varied these locations are and you never know exactly what you're about to get yourself into, it is still one of Wario Land 2's defining features. All these years later, there still aren't many other games out there where you get to play basketball against a bunny, so you know, point to Wario. The game may be relatively easy, but it doesn't matter, man. It is so much fun exploring every nook and cranny and seeing everything Wario can transform into and seeing just what bosses around the next corner. It's awesome. Dude, Wario has a pet hen apparently. This is all character development, I swear, don't worry about it. Even the Super Game Boy functionality is cool. Not only do the color palettes shift to match the style of the level you're playing in, but the background often changes as well. And also, Wario Land 2 is one of those uncommon releases that not only had a gray cartridge which stuck to the limited color palettes and Super Game Boy support, but also later on a black cartridge which includes all of that plus the full color style most of this footage has been in if played on a Game Boy Color. And really, either way you play it, this is just a great looking game. Ah man, Wario Land 2 is fantastic. Once again, the man in yellow knocks it out of the park and it is easily one of the best platformers on the console. But then we got Wario Land 3. One day, while Wario is out for an airplane stroll over the woods, his vehicle runs out of fuel and crashes. And as we've established from the last game, he's immortal. He is just fine. And in a nearby cave, Wario discovers a mysterious music box that, upon inspection, sucks him into a brand new, weird world. And once inside, a hidden figure claiming to be that world's protector currently has his powers sealed. And only by finding 5 other music boxes can they be freed, and Wario can return to his world. And also he can keep any treasure he finds along the way. Yeah, go ahead and sign him up. Mechanically speaking, Wario plays exactly like he did in Game 2. He is more limited in his moveset at the start, but you do get all of those powers back and then some throughout the adventure. Not really sure how my guy forgot how to pick things up over his head, but hey, benefit of the doubt, you know, he did just survive a plane crash. There are a couple of new transformations as well. You can turn invisible, you can become a massive snowball. Dude, even a vampire that can swap into a bat with the push of a button, that one's really cool. Thanks to exclusively being a Game Boy Color game now with some extra horsepower, just a little bit, we have some extra frames of animation too. Check out Wario climbing a ladder now. Dude's packing, that's all I'm saying. But truly, what sets Wario Land 3 apart is it's actually an open-ended, nearly Metroidvania-like adventure. Seriously, each level, rather than having just a single treasure and exit, now has 4, most of which are inaccessible until you get a treasure or handful of treasures from other parts of the map. And yeah, having access to new abilities definitely does help, but what I find so damn cool about this is most of the treasures actually manipulate the environment and alter the landscape of multiple levels all at the same time. Not even including the fact that there is also a day-night system that also plays a role in what's accessible to you, as well as what enemies can pop up at any given time. And for the first hour or so of the adventure, things are incredibly linear. You're pointed in the right direction at all times and you have no real freedom. But even then though, like 2 of the earliest treasures you get are these colored tablets that come together to unlock a new level. Ah, that's so cool. Stuff like this happens on the entire journey. But before long, you start finding treasures that open up 3 or more paths at once. And then some of those new paths will do the same for even more paths, and eventually you have total freedom in what it is you want to do. And unlike most Metroid games where you simply have to remember where you have to use your new tools, you can always consult the hidden figure to point you in the right direction, allowing the game to move at a very fast pace. The exploration and the puzzle solving are what made Wario Land 2 so fun and engaging, but that is totally amplified to the nth degree here in Wario Land 3. Some of the pathways to treasures are short, like stupid only takes 30 seconds long to cross the bridge short, but the overall scope of this music box world still feels massive, especially for a Game Boy Color game. Any platformer that can contextualize what you're doing for the greater cause at every given moment is a fairly uncommon thing. But sure enough, leave it to Wario to truly be a masterclass of its form. They even brought the basketball bunny back for revenge, but this time he's playing soccer. Oh man, I love it, dude. That is top tier storytelling. There is this mini golf game that you have to do pretty often, and this part isn't really great, so it would have been nice to not rely on it so heavily for progression, but that is not enough to make this game anything less than fantastic. Besides, the whole mini golf thing is just you charging into an enemy long enough before he gets into the hole. This is totally the way Wario would want to play golf in the first place, so it's fine. I would have also liked to see Captain Syrup somehow get involved in the story. This is the first game in the series where she does not show up at all, but, you know, I guess this weird, freaky clown dude, Rudy, will suffice. Dude, why a clown? I hate this. But yeah, overall, Wario Land 3 is absolutely fantastic. One of my favorite platformers of all time, if I'm being 100% honest with you, just based on it blowing my expectations out of the water. The freedom of choice you have in some areas of Wario Land 2 are pretty cool, but to just have that in the entirety of Wario Land 3, God, it's so good. And oddly enough, Wario Land 3 is also the basis for the single player mode in Dr. Mario 64 of all things. Here's a weird bit of trivia for you. The game goes for one of the tried and true multiplayer puzzle games with a single player story mode thing, but here, all of the enemies are from Wario Land 3, even ending with Rudy the Clown. I'm not really sure if there was ever a time where people were really desperate for a Dr. Mario game with a story mode, especially one where Wario takes center stage a lot more than Mario does, but yeah, okay, yeah, sure, why not? Yeah, that's another addition to the Wario what pillar. Next up on the docket, the final numbered entry in the series, and arguably one of his best achievements, Wario Land 4 for the Game Boy Advance. A much more basic premise this time around. Wario stumbles upon a huge golden pyramid, and thanks to a random black cat, okay, gets led down into the pyramid's insides. Now go ahead and jump on these weird frog things and go and find some treasure. Why a frog? I never really understood that part, but you know, this is a series where you don't ask questions, just take it as it is and find treasure. Once again, we're at another gameplay shift for the series. Exploration still plays a vital role, but things are a lot more linear than they were in 2 and 3. You still got some hidden unlockables to find, and there are still transformations to be found, but things in general do feel like a lot more of a traditional platformer. So where Wario Land 4 truly shines though, is in its much faster speed, not just in the game's pacing, but also in Wario's controls. You can just blaze through these levels at supersonic speeds now. Of which, by the way, the level designs are fantastic, taking the weird and all over the place level themes of previous games and crafting obstacles, gimmicks, and art styles that just feel really good to traverse through. You never know what's gonna happen next. Whoever designed the domino level here deserves a massive award, dude. This entire stage is you racing against a line of falling tiles, and combine that with the really fine-tuned controls, and it is so good. There's also this new concept where, to progress down the path of the world that you're in, you gotta find the special key ghost thing in a stage, and you can only get out of that stage with it by finding the frog portal and then dashing all the way back to the vortex you came in on. Alright, so Wario's back to going through vortexes again. I guess Wario Blast does kind of show its influence, so I'll give it that. Sometimes you gotta go back through parts of the stages you came from, but sometimes brand new pathways will open up only when the time limit is ticking down, and it is always so exhilarating due to how well Wario controls. Sometimes you know what's coming up, sometimes you don't, and Wario can move really fast, but you never feel like you don't have control, and that is a very important thing that, of course, once again, Wario managed to nail. And also, yeah, the game now looks fantastic. The other games did look good, but the developers were clearly very excited with the possibilities of newer hardware here. Everything is just so colorful and vibrant, and then you get to the boss fights. Dude, what am I looking at? You know what's wild? All of these Wario Land games were developed in-house at Nintendo. Why are they always so sterile when it comes to the Mario universe? Clearly when it comes to Wario, all bets are off. What am I looking at here? And then you take a trip to the sound test menu and it's like, dude, Nintendo was clearly on that good garlic when making this one. Now, I actually think I have a bit of a hot take with this next one. Wario Land 4, fantastic game, no doubt whatsoever. But I think outside of the Virtual Boy game, this is probably my least favorite game in the series. If you're still watching the video, thank you very much, I appreciate it. Play control and the absurdity of it all is where this game shines the brightest, no doubt, and most people will agree with that. But honestly, I prefer the slower exploration of Wario Land 2 and 3 and the more grounded eeriness of the first game. The minigames are kind of better in this one, I guess, I will give it that. The wheel jumping one is where I used to spend a ton of time in as a kid. Just being off in the wild, empty desert with these weird things you're jumping over. sure, any means to get some extra money in my wallet, why not? But otherwise, I don't know, they're just kind of okay. And you'd only really do them as a means to fund these items that you can get to take some health off of the bosses before the fight begins. But those fights were never really too difficult in the first place, in my opinion, so it's more so just interesting seeing this knockoff Mr. Game & Watch do its thing more than anything else. No one explains why this guy is here, by the way, he just is, so enjoy it. This is also the shortest adventure yet, by the way. Clearly it was meant to have replay value to see how fast you can get through it, but while 2 and 3 probably take around 6 hours to fully complete, 4 only takes about 3. Not saying a short game can't be good, but I was definitely wanting more, and when it comes to the overall adventure, I definitely felt like it was lacking. The ending is pretty great though. Based on how much treasure you get on your adventure, the cat that you walked in with transforms back into her original form, a princess. But the form that she ends up taking is based on how many treasures that you've secured along the way. She's either a very slender and mature woman or a female Wario. Oh god, these games are cursed. I have said in passing before that I think this game blows, and a few people have actually taken issue with that over the years. Fine, you know what, fair enough. This was finally my chance to give the game another shot. I owed it to the fans out there who genuinely thought I was misspeaking about this game. Surely, Suzak Inc., that's a company I've never heard of before, must have been doing something good here. One day, while Wario is doing his daily nose picking, watches a TV show featuring the master thief, Count Cannoli. In extreme jealousy for the fact that this thief can get treasure while he's just sitting on his couch, Wario decides to invent a helmet that allows him to enter the TV. What? Oh, okay. Upon making it into the TV world, he gains control of Count Cannoli's special wand, Good Style. And from there, your quest to become a master thief far better than Count Cannoli could ever be by collecting pieces of the infamous Wish Stone begins. And hey, you know what? This is actually kind of Metroidvania-ish in style. For real this time. Look at the map. See, I'm not lying to you. Oh, okay, that's kind of neat. All of these levels have these treasure chests all over the place. And every time you get into one, you gotta do a really monotonous touchscreen game to get access to the treasure, and there are so many of these. They are so boring, dude. It wouldn't be that big of a deal if it was only like one treasure game like you had in Wario Land 2, but there are so many of these in every single level. This sucks. Oh, okay, you see, I thought you had to at least get kinda close with filling in the colors to get this one completed, but turns out no, the game doesn't care either, so why should I? Okay, but what if you're a fan of the exploration gameplay? Well, it turns out Wario has access to a bunch of brand new disguises to help traverse these locations. Cool! And you transform into one of them by drawing a symbol on Wario's body while you're also having your left hand on the D-pad so you can move, and you have the touchscreen at the same time while you're moving. Oh my god, this sucks! This is not a platformer, man. This is a thinly, and I mean thinly veiled, Metroidvania, just meant to force touch controls on you at any given moment without actually providing substance. It looks ugly, the soundtrack is really forgettable, the new characters are super lame. If you're nostalgic for Master of Disguise, more power to you, and I apologize for upsetting you, but to me, this is one of the worst platformers Nintendo's ever pumped out. What were they trying to accomplish with this? They got a no-name company to take Wario and not even do a Wario Land game. Just, hey, Wario's in a 2D platformer again. Cool, hope you like the touchscreen. A ludicrous dip in quality when you remember just how good the Wario Land games still are. You know what? It's actually good this game doesn't use the Land title. It would besmirch the entire series. But okay, if I'm too harsh here, let me end things with one very positive note. Thanks to Wario Master of Disguise, we have a canonical instance of Wario saying the word boob. And that is the moral of today's story. If you look hard enough, you can find the bright side in anything. You know, the Mario vs. Donkey Kong series is really weird now that I think about it. When it comes to all of the different side series in the Mario franchise, I feel like none are as all over the place as Mario vs. Donkey Kong. From gameplay styles to naming conventions and hell, even how the games became accessible to players. People often used to accuse Kirby of being the science experiment where Nintendo can try out a bunch of different ideas with very little risk. But in reality, you could almost say the same thing for these games too, especially in the later years. Only rivaled by like Mario Party on the e-reader, I guess? Now, were these experiments successful? No? but it is still a surprisingly varied series, and that's enough to get me interested in this weird mini Mario-filled rabbit hole. These are also the games where Pauline finally got to shine. She didn't just suddenly reappear in Odyssey as the New Donk City mayor and that's it. She played a very pivotal role in this toy-based free market duel. And what better rivalry to base this weird series on than that of Mario and Donkey Kong, the original Nintendo 1v1. While both franchises would continue to grow and evolve as the years would go on, sometimes Donkey Kong outshining Mario in his own game, let's be honest here, these are the games where they both get to come back, be the stars once again, and remind us what brought them to the dance in the first place. And then toys got involved and the plot became something like a weird meta commentary on consumerism. This is a weird series. Okay, so what if we completely turn this on its head? Our journey begins with Donkey Kong on the Game Boy, commonly called DK94, because it released in 1994. And now we have a specific comparison to Sonic 06. I know we're missing the Mario and Versus in the title, but hey look, there's Mario, he's versusing Donkey Kong, this counts. On the surface, like many other games on the Game Boy, this does just come off as a remake of the original arcade game, just with some extra moves. What, did you think Mario learned how to somersault in 64? No. This adventure took place a few years earlier, and there it is. It is really fun going through these classic stages in a new way, but once you think it's over, oh. Pulling off just a fantastic bait and switch, DK94 is actually a full-blown puzzle platformer. Each stage has a key, and you gotta figure out the best way to get to it and bring it to the locked door while avoiding an army of new enemies and getting it done in a time limit. Oh, and you got some classic bad guys here too, man. You got Bow Bow, Trash Can. There's a constant barrage of new mechanics as well. Each new idea is introduced with a little cutscene at the start of the worlds, and no gimmick ever overstays its welcome. You can pick up and throw things, Mario 2 style. There's wires all over the place that you can swing from. There are these little switches floating in the air that when you touch them, you can summon a trampoline or a flat surface. There is so much. There's even a bunch of boss encounters that manage to fit in perfectly, all being these little modifications to the original arcade idea of simply getting to Pauline. You do that, you win. And hey, even Donkey Kong Jr. is here. It is so easy to forget about this guy. Every appearance he has ever made after his own game was always so random, and then we just moved on as if it never happened, and then the poor guy lost his life trying to sell us on the Game Boy Advance e-reader. Bless his soul. DK94 is only about a 3-hour-long adventure, but it manages to do basically everything right. Even the music is really good, dude. The showdown at the tower theme did not need to go as hard as it does, but damn. Dude, damn, it is so good. It is simply put a great platformer on the Game Boy, an excellent example of an unexpected yet surprisingly faithful sequel, probably my favorite game on the entire console, honestly, and it is also a great showcase for the Super Game Boy. The use of colors is fantastic, the border is one of the best the peripheral has to offer, and there's even some voice samples. Money well spent. But now let's take this great foundation that we just created and make it all about consumerism. Mario vs. Donkey Kong for the Game Boy Advance. Okay, so like 5 seconds into just turning the game on, we're treated to DK lounging on a couch, watching TV, flipping through channels with a single buttoned remote, I don't know how that works, and he experiences hardcore FOMO, or fear of missing out, when a commercial for a new mini Mario toy drops and the speaker implants subliminal messages into his psyche.
Hurry, buy one, buy them all, buy them all, buy them all, buy them all.
Man, Donkey Kong is such an idiot. I'm glad I'm not stupid enough to fall for those types of marketing schemes. I am way too smart for that. Okay, but the real question is, how much do these mini Marios cost? Oh, you see, now that's too much. This is when DK realizes how to get them at a discount. You steal them instead.
What are you doing? What's going on here? Oh,
yeah, Mario's definitely a New York City Italian. What ensues is another world-spanning adventure, this time to rescue all of these stolen toys and bring DK to justice. And yeah, this is really just essentially more of the same, if I'm being honest. It looks a lot more impressive this time around, almost going for a Donkey Kong Country route by using the sprites that simulate 3D graphics and on the actual console itself, not blown up. It does look really good, but otherwise, I mean, the movesets are basically the same, a lot of similar puzzles show up. It's just that now, rather than just carrying a key to a door, stages also have a second act where you have to make your way to the toy. This then culminates with a final stage of the world where you have to safely guide all of the toys to their toy box. And the mini Marios all yell if they're too far away from you. Getting big Baby Mario crying vibes from this, and I don't think that's a good thing. And then of course you go and kick DK's butt. It's almost the same exact thing as the last time, except Pauline's not here, and that's a big shame. But by playing it relatively safe, yeah, this is another fun time. There's a ton of levels to play through as well. Not only is there replay value in getting a star in the levels, there's also a whole slew of harder levels once you beat the final boss, utilizing a new Mini Mario with key mechanic. There's a lineup of expert levels on top of all that, and in the Japanese version, there's even stages unlocked with e-reader cards. Wait, there were Mario vs. DK e-reader cards? However, playing both DK94 and this back to back, I think the original game is so much better. The level designs in that game are a lot more compact, and you get offered a bunch of new ideas and gimmicks at a faster rate. All of the boss fights in Mario vs. Donkey Kong revolve around simply wailing damage on DK, where at least in DK94 you had those, but you also had the puzzle-focused encounters as well to offset them. Every single level gives you a tutorial video now, even if it's for a mechanic that you've already dealt with, and considering that replaces the original's cutscenes that introduced new worlds in a lot more charming way, yeah, I don't like these. It's all very nitpicky stuff. Mario vs. Donkey Kong is still good, but DK94 is definitely better in my opinion. Also, no DK Jr. I don't appreciate the disrespect. Both of these games are still great, and it is awesome to know that there are plenty of sequels out there that are surely going to be taking that formula and expanding it with a whole bunch of new possibilities thanks to newer hardware, and you know that is not at all what happened, and I just lied to you. Alright, so this is where things get just a bit bonkers. Here we have Mario vs. Donkey Kong 2, March of the Minis. I guess the Mini Mario toys were popular enough in the last game to just go overboard with them. The story is basically the same. New toys are dropping, DK has absolutely no concept of consumerism and supply and demand, except now, rather than steal toys, he steals the returning Pauline instead. Returning, by the way, with the design we now know her from in Odyssey. And Mario, I don't know, I guess he just didn't feel like it that day to help out, so he decides to utilize the toys and the toys alone to save the day. Friggin' lazy. And what we have now is a gameplay style more akin to Lemmings than an actual platformer. Once activated, the Mini Mario toys move on their own, and it is up to you to place all the pieces in a correct way thanks to the fancy new DS touchscreen to get them all to the goal. There's a bunch of varied level themes, new gimmicks to accompany them, pretty snazzy special plus mode levels that introduce extra minis to consider, a slew of unlockable hard levels. All of this content is exactly what you need to have a great puzzle game on your hands. It does go completely against the idea of the original games that started this series being an evolution of the original arcade game, but in its own bubble, yeah, it's fine. Each of the worlds has a little mini game to play, all of the boss battles are very much touchscreen focused, there's even a full-blown level creator, and being able to share your puzzles around on message boards at the time and whatnot was really cool. Well, I assume at least. Clearly I lack all creative talent. It's all just fine. Scoping out the new landscape and figuring out all of the proper timings and pathways needed in order to get a gold rating on the level can be really satisfying. Clearly, because they went ahead and made the same game like 5 more times. Though this is the only installment where you have a lot more direct control, to be fair. Being able to get the minis to stop on command, changing direction being a very common mechanic, and replacing the building blocks with expandable girders later on, the later games go for a more simplistic route, and personally, I do think that makes for a better game. In comparison, March of the Minis does occasionally feel like more brute forcing the toys to the goal rather than genuinely solving any puzzles. But that is pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. It's still fine. But since the following games are so similar, is there any reason to go back to this one, to go back to March of the Minis? No? The 2-screen cutscenes are kinda cool though. A few years later, exclusive to the DSiWare service, we got Mario vs. Donkey Kong Minis March again. It's the same game. Like, okay, the level designs are new, the minis have a few more frames of animation now, so that's kind of nice. And like I just implied, you can no longer mess with the toys' direct movements after setting them off, which is better in my opinion, but I mean, they really couldn't be bothered giving this a whole new coat of paint. Even the story is exactly the same, except now it's presented as an animated slideshow. Ooh. Put these two games side by side, you cannot tell the difference. You see, the joke's on you, they're both March of the Minis. Wait, what's this? Guest mode? Oh yeah, you know, for when you have guests over and they want a little sampling of this game but no more. It's a common occurrence. I'm surprised more games don't have that. In actuality, it is just the main game, but lacking the ability to save your progress. So, finally a modern take on the no save mode from Sonic 3, I guess. Who played this? Did you play this? You probably didn't play this. DSiWare was such a weird service, man. I, for one, am astounded that the same service that brought us Mario Clock and Calculator didn't bring us a banger of a Mario puzzle game right here. I am furious. The true smart move is to save all the hits for a real sequel. Here we go, Mini Land Mayhem. New toy drops, Donkey Kong can't get it, steals Pauline in protest. Okay, we get it. So I do want to kind of immediately knock on this game because it is more of the same, but honestly, I actually did really like this one. It all comes down to the refined level design on top of the more refined control scheme of focusing solely on the environment around the minis while they all just move along reacting to your changes. It plays more like Minis March Again, but with level designs that match it a whole lot better. Stages also have an extra collectible coin to focus on. You very quickly have to start managing multiple mini types at once, needing to guide them to their own respective door instead of everyone piling up into a single one. And also, the music for the first world is a remix of the main theme from Super Mario Bros. 2. Oh my god. It is very, very rare, but every time Nintendo remembers that game's existence, it just fills me with joy. Going into detail about this game makes it really, really hard to sell it any more than it just being a really polished puzzle game, and probably the best the formula has seen yet. It's no DK94, but this I still like. The minigames are, once again, pretty neat. There are still a ton of levels to play through. The construction mode returns that we still can no longer utilize. That is still very upsetting. The cutscenes, like last time, aren't great, but for a late era DS game that I'm pretty sure nobody played, and I am not sure why Nintendo made it in the first place, yeah, it's pretty good. Now, when the 3DS came around with a much more compelling digital store, this may be finally the time to do something a bit different and something really cool. Mario vs. Donkey Kong Minis on the Move. Wait a second. Mario and Donkey Kong. I think that's character development. Oh my god, they did it. They actually did something new. I didn't expect that. Let's talk about it. All right, so you ever play Pipe Dream? Or the hacking game in BioShock? You know, just some game where you gotta put down a series of pipes in the correct way to typically get liquid to its destination successfully? Yeah, that's all this is. Okay, I never said it was original. I think we can officially toss out originality with this series going forward. It all comes down to if it's actually quality or not. And yeah, you know, especially with this new polished art style and this funky beat that plays when you complete a level. This is indeed a great puzzle game for the system. Each of the 4 minis here also have their own puzzle type. Mini Mario works with a set of tiles given to you over time. Peach gives you a canvas with a specific amount of specific tiles. Toad is all about working with multiple toys at once. And DK is big. I'm not smart enough for this one. During the heyday of the 3DS's eShop, I adored these pick up and play puzzle games. I played a bunch of them, and this is easily one of the best ones out there. And of course, the level builder is here as well, and currently the 3DS's online service is still alive, so hey, there's actually some value here. You can download levels finally. We are still the furthest away from the series beginnings yet, but as it stands, I do really like this one, and I look forward to Nintendo trying out some more concepts with this Mini Mario idea. Mario vs. Donkey Kong tipping stars. Alright, I guess they're fighting again. They don't even pretend like they have an original story at this point. A couple of still images with a slide transition pop into frame, and then you're in the game. Man, they really checked out on this one. That was gross. It's the same game again. Are you surprised? But now it looks better. Cool. I mean, I guess that does also mean that this is, once again, a good puzzle game, but all of the new Super Mario Bros. Games are also good platformers. It is still hard to convince someone to play every single one of them. However, with this game, Nintendo did experiment with cross-buy. The game is also available on the 3DS, and if you bought one version of it, you would also get the other. It was really cool back then seeing Nintendo give that a shot. People had been begging for some form of cross-buy at the time for a while, but why with Mario vs. Donkey Kong? Did anybody actually care? I guess there is the tipping stars mechanic now that is technically new. By downloading and playing other players' creations online, you would be able to tip them stars if you enjoyed them. That's it. Probably means now that for new players it is impossible to actually unlock everything since the game does use the stars to get the extras, but hey, who cares? It's Mario vs. Donkey Kong tipping stars for the Nintendo Wii U. The most interesting thing about this game is it is an example of a tech demo given a full release. It was originally developed as a showcase for the Nintendo Web Framework, a tool that allowed developers to create games for the Wii U using web-based code, like HTML5. Kinda neat, actually. Come on now, you have totally heard of the Nintendo Web Framework, right? It's responsible for some mega hits like Tipping Stars. Yeah, whatever, this game is just okay, even if it was a really good puzzle game, because it looks exactly the same as the other ones, no one cares. And you know what's also weird? Outside of America, Nintendo gave this game a physical release. In Europe, the cases only include a download code, not an actual disc, but in Japan, hey, look at that! An actual disc! Something tells me this will be a big collector's item in the future, but once again, who really cares? They have a really good concept for a puzzle game here, but they are completely failing to give you any reason to actually use your hard-earned money and buy them. So the perfect response is, what if it were free? Mini Mario and Friends Amiibo Challenge, and the Mario vs. Donkey Kong title is officially dead, and now I'm sad. How did the series go on for as long as it did? I am quite amazed by that. It started off so cool, man. You take the original arcade game and evolve it for modern platforms, and you add in some new lore like bringing Pauline back into the fold. They did a great job. DK94 is still to this day fantastic. The original Mario vs. Donkey Kong is really good as well. And I guess in the grand scheme of things, I did enjoy Mini Land Mayhem 2, but man, the name Mario vs. Donkey Kong really means nothing anymore. The toy stuff is cool, they're really cute, I will give them that, but there is such potential for a modern Mario platformer that's all about puzzle solving instead of just platforming. This series, as it initially was, really deserves another chance. Ooh, that's right, the minis did show up in Mario Kart, I guess, so all's been forgiven then. But like I said at the start of the video, Nintendo did try different delivery methods with these games, and I will give them credit, that is kinda neat. You got the big bait and switch with the arcade game remake, arguably the biggest game Nintendo made for their DSiWare service, even though that bar was incredibly low. This was the series they attempted cross-buy with, and now you have a game that is free to play as long as you have some amiibo. So, okay, fine, I do already have all of these amiibo. Was this final game in the series any good? So the way Mini Mario and Friends Amiibo Challenge works is there's this whole lineup of minis from the Mario franchise now, right? And by tapping the corresponding amiibo, you get to play as them and access their very own very tiny set of 4 stages. All of the stages that you unlock have unique themes, like Luigi's Mansion for his stages, as well as original gimmicks like bouncing eggs off of walls for Yoshi. The stages for Rosalina all have pull stars and it plays the observatory theme from Galaxy, and ooh, I love that so much. They took an idea that makes total sense for the character and made it work within the confines of the toy puzzle idea. That's pretty cool. If you're lacking some of the amiibo to fully complete the game, as long as you have any amiibo, you can still play some of the game, just as this little ability-less block dude though. He does nothing cool. Boo! You're really missing out on the majority of the game at that point. It did get released on 3DS as well, which is way more fitting for this type of game in my opinion, but there's just nothing tying this game together. It is just a small series of levels if you already have the amiibo. Like, I totally understand there was a lot of pressure on Nintendo to make games for amiibo that made it seem like if you bought the figure, it wouldn't be used for just one game, and I guess it is a bit better than that stupid amiibo tap game that they also did. Most of you probably blocked it out of your memory and it shows, but the amount of content that's here if you do have every amiibo is still so minimal, and what is here is probably the easiest set of levels the franchise has seen yet. So once again, it's just kinda whatever. Just make another DK94, I am begging you. So, considering Mini Mario and Friends Amiibo Challenge doesn't really have much of an ending, the true conclusion is in Tipping Stars. I'm about to get to the ending right now, it's the only one I haven't seen yet, just gotta do one last puzzle here. Let's see, maybe the series actually has a fulfilling conclusion.
Oh? Thank you very much.
Oh!